I'm Mabel Jong. Thanks for watching WHCC TV. We're giving you continuing coverage of all of the great keynotes here at the Congress from Washington, D.C. And in about 45 minutes, we're going to hear from Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who is, of course, the former FDA commissioner, and we get to talk with him first before he steps on stage. Dr. Gottlieb, it's so great to see you here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for attending our Congress. Let's start with what you're planning to speak with attendees later on in your keynote.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ways we operate at FDA, some of the things I think that made us successful in terms of our ability to advance policy, get things implemented, and then some of the policies that we fashioned that I think are going to be more secular in terms of their impact on the healthcare sector. So what we did when it comes to trying to write the modern framework for the regulation of gene therapies, cell-based regenerative medicine, digital health, where we went to a firm-based approach. So rather than regulating the digital health tools themselves, we're regulating the firms to promulgate them. What I saw when I came into FDA, where there were sort of multiple areas of new technology where the modern rules hadn't been written for how they were going to be regulated, and the real opportunity that I had over the 2 years that I was there was we fashioned a lot of those rules, and we fashioned it in guidance, we fashioned it in regulation, and so over a very, very brief period of time, it was sort of a unique period of time, we were able to write the modern rules for the regulation of new technologies, and not just on the medical side, also on the food side. You saw a lot of food innovation, you saw biotech starting to migrate into the food sector with cultured meat and synthetic biology being used to create food ingredients, and you also saw it on the tobacco side, the opportunity to use non-combustible forms of nicotine delivery as a way to transition adult smokers off of combustible tobacco. Of course, there were problems with that, and still are, with the youth use of those same products, particularly the e-cigarettes.
Mm-hmm. You've been very vocal also during your time at the FDA about drug pricing and how to open up the market more, including allowing more biosimilars to come on the market. What will be the status of that work now that you've left the FDA?
Well, I think the work's going to go on. There's two elements to this. There's price competition, and product competition. I saw our job as trying to create product competition, get more products onto the market, particularly lower cost generic alternatives, and then if you have good policy frameworks in place, you're going to get price competition from those products. And so I saw as my job trying to bring onto the market more generic medicines. We did that on a small molecule side, where we tried to tackle some of the issues associated with the challenges in getting complex generics onto the market. We also did it on the biosimilar side. We put out new guidance documents, new policy to try to make it more efficient to get biosimilars onto the market, to try to make claims around interchangeability. I still see the biggest barrier to biosimilar adoption not necessarily being the regulatory process, although there's still things you could do to make the regulatory process and the development process more efficient. It's really the commercial impediments, particularly the rebating structure in the market, where you have these very large rebates on the incumbent biologics. And when the biosimilars want to penetrate the market, if a health plan wants to switch over from the branded biologic to the biosimilar, they lose all the rebates on that branded biologic. So unless they can also move all their patients over to the biosimilar, which is very hard, now they're buying the legacy biologic at full freight, at full price. And so they're losing money for multiple quarters. And the biggest challenge that I see when I talk to the manufacturers, to the biosimilar manufacturers, is actually physician reluctance on adoption. That's going to take time to resolve. I'm actually optimistic. I think this market's going to continue to evolve and take shape. I think it's going to take time. I think some of the expectations that this would be sort of, overnight, you'd see really rapid biosimilar penetration. I think those were unrealistic, and I'll just close by saying, if you look back at the early days of Hatch-Waxman and small molecule generics, it took many years before physicians gained confidence in prescribing those drugs, even though they were just as safe and effective as the branded drugs. I think we're going to see the same thing play out on the biosimilar side, where it's going to take time for doctors to feel comfortable transitioning to the biosimilars, particularly when you're dealing with curative therapy, treatments for things like cancer.
Well, you've also said that perhaps pharma companies could take a short-term hit for long-term gain on pricing.
Well, the health plans.
Oh, the health plans,
right.
I'm sorry. The health plans taking that hit. Any chance that that's really going to happen?
I don't understand why it doesn't happen, because if you're a health plan, you're looking at 1 or 2 quarters, and you say, okay, if I put this biosimilar in my formula, I'm going to lose all the rebates. I'm only going to be able to move maybe 20-30% of my market share over initially, and then maybe another 10 or 15% a year. So now I'm buying the biologic at full freight. I'm losing money. But if you look out 2 years and you open up the market to biosimilar competition, you're going to save money potentially. I mean, you have to see how this stacks up for each individual plan, but I think if they would look out over a longer time horizon, they would see that they would save money, and they would also help create the market for the biosimilars, which is going to benefit them in the long run on a much broader scale. I think they're looking out 1 or 2 quarters, and they're saying, I don't want to lose money for the next quarter or two. Easy for me to say, to tell them to lose money, but I do think we all need to take a long-term view here about trying to get these biosimilars onto formularies.
You're moving back to the American Enterprise Institute. Are you still going to be involved with pricing issues, or what are your priorities going to be when you join the Institute again?
Well, I'm there right now, and my focus is going to be on drug pricing issues. So I'm going to still weigh in on regulatory policy issues, still work with Capitol Hill, have some meetings already set up with some members and some staff to try to help them think about different reforms. But most of my initial work is going to be focused on drug pricing issues. There's obviously a lot of activity on the Hill right now. People are looking for some new ideas on how to try to create more competition in the market and make sure that when there is competition, when you have product competition and you have price competition, the discounts flow in the form of something that can actually benefit patients and not necessarily a back-ended rebate. So 3 things we have to fix in the market. Trying to think of new policy solutions to try to instigate that kind of market competition.
Well, and also Medicare, you were also hoping to talk about too?
Well, I worked at Medicaid for a while, so I mean, I'm going to look at how you can reform aspects of the way Medicare pays for things to try to create more competition. So in particular, one of the things I've been talking a lot about, and now I plan to focus more time on, is in Medicare Part B, so the part of Medicare that pays for the drugs administered in doctor's offices, which are by and large the biologics, the biosimilars we're talking about, moving that towards a competitively bid system where those drugs are purchased in the same way like small molecule drugs are, where you have health plans bidding for them. For the lowest cost products, you have formularies, and when you have therapeutically interchangeable products, you have multiple products in a category, you actually have health plans competing to try to get that product at the lowest price and making different manufacturers compete against each other. We don't have that right now. Medicare, under the current payment scheme in Medicare Part B, which is the average sales price plus 6%, ASP plus 6%, Medicare is a price taker in that scheme. I was there when we wrote the rules for that back in 2003 when we created ASP plus 6% under the Medicare Modernization Act. We did that because we envisioned that Medicare would be a price taker. We never envisioned that these would be multi-source drugs and you'd have multiple competitors within a therapeutic category, let alone therapeutically interchangeable drugs. Now these are multi-source drugs, and Medicare is not taking advantage of that opportunity, to use that competition to try to extract lower prices for patients.
Okay. You were at the FDA less than 2 years, right?
2 years.
23 months.
23
about.
months.
Seems short. Did it seem short to you?
Well, it was a 24/7 job, so
Okay,
look,
maybe
it seemed short in respect of it was a great opportunity, and we got a lot done over that period of time.
Clearly, yeah.
But it was hard, and I miss my family. I was commuting from New York, and I was down here. They were up there, so I'd go back on weekends. But we got a tremendous amount done. We put out over 400 policy guidances. We broke the record in my first year for the number of guidances we put out, and then doubled it in the second year. That's going to be a record that stands for some time. We put out dozens of regulations. We, in 2017, broke the record for the most novel drugs, novel devices, and generic drugs approved, and broke our own record in 2018. So I think those are going to stand for a while. So we got a lot done. In a relatively short period of time, but not too short. I mean, 2 years. I think I measure it by how much you get done, not necessarily the length of time. It felt like a good run.
Do you think you'd ever want to return?
I'd certainly consider doing public service again. Absolutely.
All right, Dr. Scott Gottlieb.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for your
having me.
time, and thank you for tuning in. We'll have much more to come.